Hi, and welcome to this Put Your Plan into Action Do's and Don'ts video lesson. I'm Alice Roach, and I'm a Senior Research Associate in the Division of Applied Social Sciences at the University of Missouri. This video lesson is part of a project titled Marketing Opportunities for Missouri's Niche Meat and Poultry Processors. The project received funding from the Missouri Agricultural and Small Business Development Authority, and using that funding, a team at the university has developed information and resources that Missouri meat businesses can use to enhance their marketing efforts. In this particular presentation, the goal is to sum up the marketing content that we've shared throughout this video series and share some top takeaways to consider when you are developing and implementing an integrated marketing communications plan. So the first tip that I want to emphasize is the importance of committing to your plan. In an earlier video lesson, Jalen Peckman described the integrated marketing communications planning process in detail. And here I want to share highlights of the key steps of that process to refresh your memory. The first step is to state your mission. So your mission should answer the question, why is it that I do what I do? Or why are you operating your particular business? By creating a well-articulated mission statement, you can use some of that information to then inform the subsequent stages of that planning process. And the second step of the planning process is to set your goals. So your goals should be objectives that you want to achieve through your business with help from your marketing communications efforts. Your goals should be SMART and that they should be specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, and timed. So for example, a goal statement might be something like you want to increase sales throughout your business by 10% in a particular year-long period. After you've established your goals, the next step in this process will be to name strategies. So you can think of strategies as pathways to follow to help you move incrementally closer to achieving those goals. For the particular goal of increasing your sales, a relevant strategy might be to develop new products and then incentivize new product trial. By incentivizing new product trial, you may be able to grow your business with existing customers if they like the new products that you've developed. Additionally, you may be able to reach out to new customers that haven't previously engaged in your business, but do have an interest in those new products that you have developed. So after you have named your strategies, the next step is to choose tactics that align with your goals and your strategies. So tactics would be the specific tasks, action items, or activities that you implement to align with your strategies and to help move you closer to meeting your goals. So for your strategy of incentivizing product trial, a possible tactic to consider would be to engage influencers on social media who can show themselves trialing your products, and then hopefully their experiences will encourage their followers to look into your products and want to try your products too. The last step in this process is to write your key messages. So your key messages should encapsulate the information that you want to share in all of your communication deliverables. So by writing those key messages, you can then cross-check that list of key messages with your communication deliverables to ensure that you are sharing all of the pertinent information in those deliverables. So at the end of this process, you'll have a plan that you can use to guide all of your marketing communications decision-making. Ideally, this plan will be on paper or in writing or in an electronic format. And so you can go back and revisit it and also share it with other stakeholders in your business. The next tip that I want to share is to think about the resources that you have to allocate to your marketing communications efforts, and then to not too thinly spread those resources. So any business embarking on implementing an integrated marketing communications plan will have a limited set of resources. So you want to most efficiently use those resources. And to do that, you first need to articulate what resources you are willing to dedicate to your marketing communication efforts. And really, there are three types of resources that I think are important to assess. The first would be funding. So you can think of funding as the budget that you're willing to dedicate to marketing communications. Some communication deliverables will have costs associated with them. For instance, if you want to run an ad, you'll need to create the ad content. And then you'll also need to buy the time or space that's needed to deliver that ad to your target audience. So the cost of buying that time or space will be an out-of-pocket expense that you need to consider when you're developing your plan. The second type of resource to consider would be time, and in particular, the time of your personnel to engage in the marketing communication plans that you have established. In some cases, some communication channels will require more personnel time than others. For example, social media is a platform that doesn't tend to require a lot of out-of-pocket expenses unless you're running ads. But to operate on social media and have a strong presence, you need to be able to dedicate personnel time to that social media presence. For example, if you want to develop a Facebook page, then you will need to allocate some personnel time to that Facebook marketing effort. So you have personnel time dedicated to creating content, to monitoring opportunities for engagement on that platform, and then also to assess your performance over time so you can make some incremental improvements to your Facebook marketing approach. And then the third resource to consider would be the level of expertise of the personnel who are working on implementing your marketing communications plan. Individuals who have more expertise and experience and feel more comfortable with different marketing communications technologies may be able to work more efficiently than a team that doesn't quite have that same level of experience. So by assessing the experience level of your team, you can make more realistic expectations about what you can achieve through your marketing communications efforts. The second question to ask yourself with respect to resources is, where are your customers? And what I mean by that is, what types of communication channels are your customers or prospective customers using to collect information about your products and services? And then also, what channels are they using that they would want to interact with your brand or your business? And so I organize these types of channels into two different buckets, and those would be online and offline. So offline channels are those that are accessible online. So they would include social media, websites, search result pages, and so forth. Offline communication channels refer to more traditional media. So for example, newspapers, magazines, TV, and radio. If you understand the channels that your customers are using, then you can then allocate resources to those channels that give you the greatest opportunity to reach the greatest number of your prospective audience members. The next tip that I want to emphasize also relates to understanding your audience, and that's to not assume that your audience is like everyone else. So a lot of the general best practice research that we have shared is not specific to any particular audience. It tends to be an average of how people interact on a given platform or how marketers tend to approach using a given platform. It's important to recognize that your audience is just a subset of that total population, though. So it may behave differently than the average. And so when you're reviewing general best practice research, that can be really helpful information when you're just getting started with using a particular social media platform. For example, the Sprout Social data here on the screens presenting some best times to post on Facebook. And this would be general to all users and all marketers' Facebook pages. But as you have some experience in using a given platform, you'll want to mine the analytics data that you can so you learn more about your audience and its needs and its expectations, and then you can adjust your approach accordingly. So this next tip is specific to the content that you create. And when you're developing content, look for ways to make that content both creative and relevant. So with respect to creativity, the old adage of thinking outside of the box really does apply, because if you create creative messages or you deliver your content in a creative way, then that differentiates your message and your business and helps that message stand out. But not only must your content be creative, it should also be relevant and speak to the needs and interests of your particular audience. So when you're developing relevant content or thinking about how to develop relevant content, I tend to like to think about tapping into different news values. So when people go online or use a particular communication channel to collect information, they tend to be interested in seeing news. So if you tap into one of these three news values, then you may have an opportunity to develop relevant content that resonates with your audience. The first news value that I wanted to introduce would be novelty or exclusivity. So in other words, are you offering information in a particular channel that your users can't get in any other channel? If that's the case, then that gives your users a reason to follow you and keep track of the information that you're sharing in that particular platform. Timeliness refers to sharing information at a point of time when it's useful to a particular audience. And then proximity refers to ensuring that the content that you're sharing is relevant to where a particular audience is at a particular moment. So to give you an example of how to tap into these timeliness and proximity news values when you're creating content, let's take the case of National Pork Month as a holiday or observance that you may want to include in your content marketing plan. So let's say that you want to observe National Pork Month, which is celebrated in this country in October every year. And so to develop a timely piece of content about National Pork Month, you'll probably want to target your posts sometime in October, given that that's when we celebrate National Pork Month. So that will make your content timely. To tap into this proximity news value element, you may want to find ways to try to localize that National Pork Month story. So for example, if you feature local pork producers who supply animals for your business, then that's a way to speak to your local audience and make that national story feel more localized. And then the last tip with respect to being relevant would be to find ways to add value through the content that you are creating and sharing. This is particularly true on social media. On social media, 80% of your content should be focused on educating, informing, or entertaining, and only about 20% of your content should be overtly promotional. The next tip is to recognize the importance of listening in the communication process. So that can sometimes be hard for marketers because we spend so much time and effort crafting messages that hopefully will resonate with our target audience, but closing that feedback loop and listening to your audience has a lot of value. That's because it shows that you're interested in creating a dialogue with your audience. It also shows that you are willing to learn. By listening, you can also pick up on problems in the marketplace or problems that may be specific to your products or services or businesses, and then you can develop strategies to resolve those problems. Arby's is a good example of a company that did incorporate listening into its communication strategy, and that really paid off too. So a few years ago, Arby's recognized a business challenge in that it thought consumers had a limited understanding of its business. It thought that consumers really only thought Arby's offered roast beef products, and the business wanted to stress that it was more diversified. And so Arby's developed the image that you see on the slide here, which is an image of a bunch of different cuts of meat stacked up on top of each other. And when consumers saw that image, that really piqued their interest in wanting a sandwich that had all of these different types of cuts of meat. And so Arby's developed what was called the Meat Mountain Sandwich, which had chicken tenders, ham, bacon, steak, brisket, just a variety of different meat cuts. And so that delivered on that need that the consumers were voicing after they saw this particular ad. So not only did this Meat Mountain Sandwich deliver on those needs that these consumers were citing, but several different media outlets also picked up on the story, which enabled Arby's to get some earned media coverage and further increase the awareness that its brand was about more than just offering roast beef sandwiches. It really was a more diversified business. The next tip is to think about ways to incorporate branding mandatories into your content strategies. Branding mandatories, if you're not familiar with that term, refers to the branded elements that you want to consistently use in your marketing communications efforts. So branded elements that you may choose to use would be the colors that you use, the font choices you use, the writing style and tone that you take, and the logos or taglines that you incorporate into your content. So by consistently using these branding mandatories, your target audience will easily recognize that it's your business that's sharing a message even before that audience has consumed the message that you've created. So to give you some examples about the power of branding mandatories, I'll share with you a series of logos. And we'll start with this logo that says Facebook, but the colors that are used in this logo and the font choice for this logo may lead you to believe that this business isn't actually Facebook that's doing the talking here, but it's Google, because Google tends to use a multicolored logo. Plus, it uses this really distinctive font. As a second example, this logo says Google, but because of the white text, the blue background, the font choice, and then also the use of all lowercase letters, you may not see, or rather think Google whenever you see this logo. You may think Facebook, because Facebook has used these branded elements in terms of the blue background, the white text, the all lowercase for its name, business name. And so these examples are hopefully communicating the power of branding mandatories and sharing that how you say something is almost as important or just as important as the message that you're attempting to communicate. The next tip is to make your messages visual. So visuals have a lot of power, and marketers have a lot of visual options to incorporate into their messaging. You can choose from photos, videos, graphics, or a combination of these elements. And visuals have a lot of power because they can either reinforce messages that are text-based messages, or visuals can really take a starring role in communicating a particular message that you want to share. In this first example here, the visual will serve as a complement to a written message. This is a tweet that is just a text-based tweet, and it's emphasizing that it's National Grilling Month, and this particular restaurant offers a flame-grilled ribeye as a way to celebrate summer. So we can pick up on those messages from the text, but when you pair that text with this image of that flame-grilled ribeye, it probably makes us more interested in going and checking out what this restaurant has to offer than if we just saw that flame-grilled ribeye mentioned in a text-based tweet. If we have that photo, then that could pique our interest further. Burger King in early 2020 developed a campaign that really relied on the visual element more than any sort of text to communicate that it had removed preservatives from its Whopper menu item. So here in this image, you can see that, or this ad, you can see that the text reads, "The beauty of no artificial preservatives." And then we see this Whopper that has mold covering it. And what this is sharing, or what Burger King is trying to do here, is show what happens whenever it's removed those artificial preservatives from its Whopper. Marketing experts were somewhat split on the effectiveness of this campaign. One camp of experts really didn't think that this was very effective because it really is breaking all the rules of food marketing, which tend to be focusing on really glitzy images of food products. But another camp of marketers suggested that this could be an effective visual because it really got consumers and marketers alike to talk about the fact that Burger King had removed its preservatives or artificial preservatives from its Whopper menu item. So this is a good example of how the visual really commanded a lot of the story and told a lot of the story for Burger King in this case. The next tip to consider would be to make your content easy to consume. And this is particularly important today because we are just inundated as consumers with marketing messages. In fact, McKinsey has suggested that the average US full-time worker receives 120 email messages a day. Adweek has reported that Americans see anywhere between 4,000 and 10,000 ads per day. So your message really needs to break through that clutter in order for your target audience to receive that message and then absorb the message that you're attempting to share. There are some practices to consider to make your content easy to consume. One of those would be to write short sentences, as short sentences tend to be easier to read and then easier to absorb the content you're trying to share. The second tip would be to keep your paragraph short. So we as information consumers tend to not like to see large blocks of text. We tend to scan content to try to find the content that we think is most relevant to us. And so it's hard to do that scanning process when you have a large block of text. By breaking that large block of text into multiple shorter paragraphs, those shorter paragraphs do become easier to skim for the information that we do think is most relevant to us. There's a similar approach with lists, and that it's easy to scan a list to pick up on the content that we think is important. Including supporting images is a good way to reinforce the message and make your content a little easier to consume if the visual element can share part of that message. And then the last tip with respect to making your content easy to consume would be to add different text formatting elements, such as adding boldface formatting, italics, and also underlines to emphasize key portions of your message. So the next tip is to create a content calendar. So when you're developing and implementing your integrated marketing communications plan, there's a good chance that you're going to want to share a variety of messages and use a variety of communications platforms. That can be challenging to manage all of that content. And so a content calendar is a good tool to help you organize that content. You can see an example of what a content calendar might look like here on the slide. I encourage you to create a content calendar for each communication channel that you intend to use. And then within that calendar, you can create a row for each piece of content that you'll be creating. And then for each piece of content, you'll want to include the date that you'll share that content, the message that you want to share, the visual that will complement the message, and then add any other notes that are relevant. You'll also note that I have a column in here for a goal. It's good to try to connect each message that you create to a goal that you've stated in your integrated marketing communications plan, because that shows that you have a deliberate focus on creating messages that are meant to drive performance in helping you to reach those goals. So as an example of how to use this content calendar, let's assume that you are developing a new product, fried turkeys, to sell for Thanksgiving, and that you want to use your hometown newspaper as a communication channel to share about these new fried turkeys that you have available this year. So let's assume that you want to run an ad on November 20th in your local newspaper, and you've developed your message about your new fried turkeys. You want to include a visual or a photo, rather, of that fried turkey as part of that ad message. And then you have a few notes here about the size of the ad. You're wanting to run it in full color, and it's only going to be a one-time run. So you're only going to be placing this ad one time. You can also see that we have corresponded our message to a goal. So this also corresponds to the examples that we shared earlier about we wanting to increase our sales by 10% in the next year. And we're trying to incentivize new products, or new product trial rather, which was one of the strategies that we mentioned earlier. So in addition to including the publication dates for particular pieces of content in your content calendar, you also may want to add different milestone dates. So for example, if you're developing an ad for your local newspaper, the run date or the publication date would be important to note in your calendar, but you'll also likely have a lead time between when you need to submit your content to the paper and when that content will be actually printed in the paper. So you can include that deadline for when you need to send your content to the paper as a milestone within this content calendar so that you don't miss that key deadline. So the last tip that I want to share is the importance of measuring your results. So as I mentioned earlier, you will be investing resources into implementing your integrated marketing communications plan. So it's important to use all the data that you can collect to assess how you are doing in terms of capturing a return on that investment. So some types of performance data that you might consider collecting would be engagement rates on your social media posts, the number of times that certain promo codes are being used, or the number of clicks on online ads that you are running. You can use those performance data to sort of gauge whether or not you are trending in the right direction in terms of getting the response that you would like from those particular communication deliverables. As important as it is to collect data, however, it's important to realize that when in marketing, measurement is imperfect. And that's because you don't necessarily know the pathway that each customer follows to make a purchase. And oftentimes, a sale is the product of multiple interactions between your business and a particular customer. For example, a customer may see a print ad for one of your products and then may see a series of social media posts about your products and then may receive an email from you. And that email may be the particular communication tool that triggers a sale. But it's hard for you to then assign a value to each of those communication deliverables that help to contribute to that one sale. So to address this challenge, what I would encourage you do is to track your overall metrics. So how close are you getting to meeting the goals that you established in your integrated marketing communications plan? If those metrics are trending in the right direction and you're comfortable with that trend trajectory, then that indicates that you probably have a good mix of the right messages and you're using the right communication channels. If you don't feel comfortable with the direction that those trends are heading, then you may want to make some adjustments and either changing your messages or choosing different communication channels so you do feel more comfortable with the trajectory of those metrics trends. So with that, that wraps up this presentation about the do's and don'ts of developing and implementing an integrated marketing communications plan. Thanks so much for joining us.